Hello, my name is Dan Teichman. I'm a Director of Solutions Marketing at Ribbon, and I'm here to talk to you about why distributed denial of service attacks are happening against VoIP infrastructure and services. We'll talk a bit about how they happen, what impacts they have, and most importantly, how to detect and mitigate them. So let's start with the first part. What's happening now with DDoS attacks with respect to VoIP infrastructure and VoIP services? Why are they happening? Well, across the board, DDoS attacks are on the rise because they're not that complex to execute and they're relatively easy to cause a lot of damage. According to NetScout, in the first half of 2021, there were 5.4 million DDoS attacks. That's just a huge number, and that's not expected to diminish. So coupled with the ease of executing DDoS attacks, along with the continued growth and adoption of VoIP infrastructure and VoIP services, it's not surprising that bad actors are finding it easier to look for opportunities where the barrier might be low. So VoIP infrastructure and VoIP services are a prime target simply because enterprises, and potentially also the service providers who may host services for them, may not have their VoIP infrastructure and VoIP services adequately secured. With that, there's easy openings for bad actors. So now that we know DDoS attacks are on the rise and VoIP is a target, so what does a DDoS attack look like? Well, they come in many formats and many different aspects, but I'll just focus on three trends that I find particularly interesting with respect to VoIP. Small packet size. An increasing percentage of DDoS attacks are using small packet sizes to drive very high packet rates, and that's intended to overrun the packet processing of the devices being attacked. For example, in late 2021, there was a DDoS attack against the VoIP infrastructure of one of our customers, and the average packet size for that attack was under 100 bytes. That's very small. Multi-layered. That's a second item. Bad actors target IP networks and the transport layers, as well as targeting the IP application layers. So with respect to VoIP, that means we're seeing attacks not only at the IP layers, but also we're seeing attacks at both the SIP signaling and the RTP media layers. Adaptive. We're increasingly seeing DDoS attacks that are being modified in multiple stages, and they're continuous as the attack changes in real time. So one attack I'm aware of began as a brute force attack that was intended for traffic flooding on an open IP port. And that evolved to become a volumetric attack using UDP reflectors and botnets, and then changed again to become targeted attacks to flood specific VoIP APIs. Let's move on to my next topic. What are the impacts of these DDoS attacks? Well, for the enterprise or their VoIP hosted service provider, it means business disruption. In some cases, it could be quite significant. It also means a potential loss of customer confidence and the negative impacts on their business reputation, especially if that attack makes it into the news. I think, though, on a more concerning level, the DDoS attacks are increasingly associated with ransom demands. The attacker says, "I'll stop my DDoS attacks if you pay my ransom." Well, that may in fact be honored, but it may not. It could just as easily encourage subsequent attacks. As a reference, in 2021, there was a report from Carrero Network Security that said once a successful DDoS attack occurs, there's a 29% chance a subsequent attack will occur within 7 days. I think that's pretty concerning. I think another major impact to keep in mind is these DDoS attacks add complexity for an enterprise who's migrating to cloud-hosted UC or call center solutions. I think the attacks raise the imperative for due diligence on behalf of the enterprise and the security that can be delivered by the hosted VoIP service provider. So I'm not suggesting that the trend of moving to hosted UC or contact center solutions is anyway going to diminish because of these DDoS attacks. However, I do think it raises the visibility and the importance of a service provider, a hosted service provider, being able to convince their enterprise customers that they have DDoS mitigation solutions in place. Which brings me to the last topic. How do you detect these DDoS attacks? Specifically for DDoS attacks on VoIP infrastructure and VoIP services, the primary detection and mitigation tool will be a session border controller, or an SBC. Now, SBCs are in the call path. They're specifically designed to provide security for these services and traffic, and they will include DDoS detection and mitigation. So let me talk about some of the key features that an SBC has to provide. First is access control list policing. which is the ability to control the traffic and only allow traffic in from trusted, pre-configured IP addresses. Media packet policing. Again, accepting media packets, but only if they correspond to a session that was negotiated with proper signaling. IP address learning. Now, not all traffic coming in from valid peers or endpoints, their IP addresses may not be known a priori. So peers will be confirmed and designated as trusted after receipt of a specific set of valid SIP requests. Media address learning. If a peer media address is advertised in the SIP SDP but does not match the actual source address of the packets, again, it will be possible to learn the peer media addresses after seeing a limited number of RTP packets. Priority aware policing. So in this case, we're going to talk about rate limiting SIP signaling packets on a microflow basis, plus giving higher priority to packets that come from authenticated sources. What this does is it significantly increases the likelihood that the good traffic comes through and the malicious traffic is stopped. And finally, application layer call admission control. So this is rate limiting traffic and or bandwidth usage on an IP trunk or an IP trunk group, however it's designated. All right, so I know I've covered a lot of information in a short amount of time, and what I think you really want to take away from this video is the following 3 points. Yes, DDoS attacks are a problem, and yes, VoIP infrastructure and services are a known target. DDoS attacks are not static. Bad actors are very creative. When the attack vector is a VoIP infrastructure or services, you need a session border controller that's flexible, automated, and able to detect and mitigate these attacks. Thank you.